Yo, what is up guys? Ethan here back with another video. In today's episode, we're going to be starting How to Fix College Football Week. And the first video of this series will be Conference Realignment. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe and like button if you haven't already. It would help me out a lot and I would appreciate it. So, also, if you didn't know, that's Paris Ford on the screen. One of the best safeties in the entire nation for Pittsburgh. So, in this Power 6, we're going to have the original Power 5, the Pac12, the Big 10, the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC, and we're also going to be bringing back Big East football. That will be the last one we go over, though. So, we're just going to be going from conference to conference, and we're going to be looking at the teams. One thing to say before I get started, each conference has a total of 12 teams, 6 teams in each division. It's either going to be North and South or East and West. It just depended on which conference it is. But mainly it's going to be North and South. So, yeah, I tried to go. It's not basically geographically. So you're not going to be seeing, you're not going to, I don't know how to describe it. But, you're not going to see Clemson in the SEC. It's going to be based off like the current conferences, but removing and adding some teams into each conference. So, without any more interruptions, let's get straight into the first conference. So, we're going to be starting with the conference that has the least changes to it, and that is going to be the Pac-12. In the Pac-12 North, we have Washington, Washington State, Utah, Boise State, Oregon, and Oregon State. And in the Pac-12 South, we have UCLA, USC, Stanford, Cal, Arizona, and Arizona State. There's literally only 2 changes. You take out Colorado and you replace them with Boise State. And I technically know that Utah is more south than Cal and Stanford, I'm pretty sure. But just for travel purposes, we decided to make the South only California and Arizona schools. So it's going to be easier for Utah to travel to Boise State and Oregon and all that instead of going all the way down to Arizona. So I personally like that change a little bit more. And Colorado did go on to a new conference. And yeah, so barely any changes in this Pac-12 division. Also, the conference championship game will be located in Los Angeles in a new SoFi Stadium. I know that they're going to be making that change to the Allegiant Center in Vegas, but I really, even though it's technically a new market, I really don't like that decision. And personally, I think the SoFi Stadium is going to be a better stadium and attract more football fans. So I decided to go with that stadium as the location. Now let's go on to our next conference. So our next conference is going to be the Big 12, which the name will actually make sense now since there's 12 teams. And I personally think more fans will actually like this conference realignment on how it currently is today. In the Big 12 North, we have Kansas, Kansas State, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State. And in the Big 12 South, we have Colorado, Texas, Baylor, Texas Tech, TCU, and Texas A&M. So we have 4 new teams: Nebraska and Missouri in the North, and Colorado and Texas A&M in the South. So before, I had to redo the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Initially, I had the North Conference and the Texas Conference. And instead of Colorado, it was actually Houston, and Colorado was still in the Pac-12. But after that decision, Boise State would not be in this Power 6 conference. And with this Power 6, I personally think fans would rather see Boise State in the bigger conference than Houston. So even though Oklahoma and Oklahoma State would be more closer to these teams like Baylor and Texas, I personally think Colorado is the most south team of Missouri and Nebraska, and I decided to put them in the South. It's kind of like a situation on how West Virginia is, but it's like twice, not nearly as close as far as West Virginia has to drive here now, but I really like this Big 12. And yeah, now let's go on to our next conference. Now we go from the Big 12 to the Big 10. And this Big 10, who knows? Some people may think it's better. In the Big Ten East, we have Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Notre Dame, and Indiana. In the Big Ten West, we have Iowa, Iowa State, Northwestern, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois. So with this new Big Ten, Penn State, Maryland, and Rutgers are not in there anymore because there was 14. And now we also add Notre Dame and Iowa State. Notre Dame was an independent, and Iowa State was in the Big 12. So when I was doing all this, I initially still had Iowa State in the Big 12, but then Missouri was left out. And personally, I would think geographically and mind thinking, the Big Ten would rather have Iowa State than Missouri in the first place. So also, you still keep that Iowa and Iowa State rivalry. And when it comes to Missouri, I really don't know any rivalries unless I'm forgetting one. I don't think Missouri has a rivalry with any of these Big Ten teams. But the big thing people are going to be talking about with this conference is Notre Dame's in it. And yes, by far the East is way more powerful with Ohio State, Michigan, and now Notre Dame. Yeah, Notre Dame also has tons of rivalries. There are rivals with Michigan and Purdue. There's probably more, but I'm going blank right now. But I really, even though Penn State's not in this Big Ten anymore, I really enjoy this new Big Ten look. Now let's go on to our next conference. So our next conference we have is the SEC. So in the SEC East, we have Georgia, Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Florida, and Florida State. In the SEC West, we have LSU, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Auburn, and Alabama. So throughout this whole Power 6 conference realignment, the SEC West is the only division that actually stays the same. So, well, I actually think there's one team missing, but I could be wrong. I'm not good with my math today. But SEC West stays the same. But with this new SEC, the East is completely different. Number one, you have Florida State. Personally, I think Florida State would rather like the SEC than the ACC. And also, even though your only rivalry technically is with Florida, as long as I know, you can definitely build up some rivalries with these teams. But the main one is going to be Georgia Tech, as number one, you are rivals with Georgia, and number two, you actually used to be in the SEC. So now you're back to the SEC, and you can basically just write your history there. I don't know. So even though this may not be the flashiest SEC we have seen, I think geographically it's a little bit better. Also, you may be asking where's Kentucky. We'll be getting to that later. But let's go on to our next conference. So with our fifth conference, we have the ACC. In the ACC North, we have Virginia, Virginia Tech, Maryland, North Carolina, Duke, and Wake Forest. In the ACC South, we have NC State, Clemson, Miami, South Carolina, UCF, and USF. So this is probably the most different out of the actual conferences. You lose Louisville, Florida State, and also Georgia Tech. But now you also regain Maryland, South Carolina, UCF, and USF. So basically, yeah, I really like this ACC. You have Maryland, who I'm pretty sure was the first team in the ACC. They're back in their the rightly deserved conference, and now you have a few great teams. One thing I really didn't like is NC State not being with North Carolina, Duke, and Wake Forest in the same division. But personally, I think those three teams are actually have better rivalries with each other, and NC State technically is the most south of the Carolina teams. So you also still keep Virginia Tech, and then the two last ones we talked about, UCF and USF. They are going to be new here. Even though USF is not mainly the best in sports, you only bring them in because they have a great rivalry with UCF, who in the sports world is definitely rising up in a lot of sports. And then South Carolina used to be in the ACC, and they have a great rivalry with Clemson. So overall, this may be a few years to get used to. Overall, I think this ACC is really good. Now let's get on to our last conference. So with our final conference in this video, we have the Big East. Now it can be any name you want, but in the Big East North, we have Boston College, Temple, Rutgers, Syracuse, Penn State, and Army. And then the Big East South, we have Cincinnati, Navy, West Virginia, Pittsburgh, Kentucky, and Louisville. I just love this conference, I'll be honest with you. Boston College should not be in the ACC. You're in a better conference here. So we take Penn State from the Big Ten and we put them in here. Also with Rutgers. Now, one thing you're thinking to yourself, football wise, the South is way better. You have Penn State, who's a legitimate threat in college football, but besides that, these teams are borderline, barely bowl teams. And when you look at the South, you could have a New Year's Six team in Cincinnati, a surprise team in Navy last year, and the list goes on and on. I know this. And I was just thinking, I really wanted to put Pittsburgh in the North, but Temple would actually have to drive like 3 extra hours than what Pitt has to do, because Temple is basically more north than anything. So even though I wanted the Pittsburgh in the North, I had to put them in the South. Otherwise, I think Pittsburgh rivalry with West Virginia actually may be a little bit more better than the Penn State one. So, yeah. So, also one last thing. Besides the Pac-12, I didn't bring this up to any other conferences. The Big 12 Conference Championship location will be in Arlington, Texas, as it is now. The SEC Conference Championship location will still be in Atlanta. The Big East tournament will be at MetLife Stadium. I was debating if it should be in MetLife Stadium or Philadelphia. I decided to go with MetLife. For the Big Ten, it's still going to be Indianapolis, and the ACC is still going to be Charlotte. So besides the Pac-12 and the newly Big East, the conference championship locations are going to be the same as it currently is. So that is it for my Power 6 conference realignment. On Wednesday or Friday, we'll be doing how to fix college football scheduling. So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. In the comment section below, which conference do you like the most and would have potentially the best games? So guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, share, subscribe, and like always, have a good day. Peace out.